Right. As you know, we're getting closer and closer to the Brexit date, and as things get a bit challenging for the government to be able to deliver this, whether it's from the EU side or the Remainers in the UK, one group have become completely ridiculous: the Liberal Democrats. Now, the Lib Dems held their conference this week in Bournemouth when they decided to change their policy and essentially take off the mask that they've been hiding behind since 2016. Now, obviously, ever since the referendum result came out, they didn't accept it, but they've been hiding behind this mask of having a second referendum. Not for the sake of that all Lib Dems want to stay, but they said, let's just have a second referendum because democracy doesn't just stop in 2016. But we all knew what the main intention was behind the People's Vote campaign, because it was basically full of Remainers. You didn't have any Brexiteer asking for a People's Vote. But at this conference, the Lib Dems announced that they're not going to even bother with the second referendum. They're just going to be cancelling Brexit altogether. Now, in an interview, the Liberal Democrat leader, Jo Swinson, was completely exposed over her views and her hypocrisy.
What was your view of Paddy Ashdown and his integrity and credibility as a former leader of your party?
Well, Paddy Ashdown was bold and fearless and determined.
Anyone that refused to honour that referendum result, and he presumed at the time that Remain was going to win, that they would be basically the enemy of democracy. And he thought he was going to be talking about Nigel Farage. Turned out that Brexit won. And yet here you are, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, the party that Paddy Ashdown loved, and you just don't want to have another vote now. You want to literally stop Brexit happening. You want to do the very thing that Paddy Ashdown said he would find unforgivable. Why?
Well, let's be clear, Paddy Ashdown wanted to stop Brexit.
No, he didn't want to stop Brexit. Obviously, Paddy Ashdown, like a lot of other Remainers, were upset that Brexit won, but they also said that, well, that's how democracy works. We've lost, let's move on.
But your name is the Liberal Democrats. I mean, Democrats is literally part of your name, not part of any other party's name. It's part of your name. And you are saying you're not going to respect the democratic vote of the people, not even by saying, actually, before we revoke Article 50, we would have a second referendum. You're just going to cancel the democratic vote.
But it does look like it may be that a general election will be upon us. And in that general election, in that democratic process, the Liberal Democrats will campaign to stop Brexit.
So if you win a democratic vote.
Now, this is really interesting because what Jo Swinson is saying is that there's no need for a second referendum, because if people vote for the Lib Dems in an election and they win a small majority, that means that every single person voted for the Lib Dems to stop Brexit and no other reason, no other policy. But it's not true, is it? Because when the former leader of the Conservative Party, William Hague, towards the end of the 90s and early 2000s, said a similar thing. And he said, a vote for the Tory party and me is basically a referendum vote to make the UK, stop the UK from joining Euro. And everyone, including the Lib Dems and Labour, said that is ridiculous because you can't just have one election and just because people vote for the Tories means that they don't want to join Euro. Remainers also said that about the 2017 election, when the majority of people voted for parties that in their manifesto accepted the referendum result. This was Labour, the Conservatives, even UKIP and all the other parties that they had accepted the result, and they said we would deliver Brexit. And when the majority of people voted for these parties, the Lib Dems and Remainers said, no, it doesn't really count, just because this was part of a manifesto for the whole party and the whole election. And again, they said the same about Boris Johnson when a few weeks ago Boris asked for an election to settle this issue, and the Remainers and Lib Dems said, no, actually, maybe we shouldn't have an election because there will be people voting for the Tory party for a number of reasons, and this is not a real mandate even if they win to deliver Brexit. But somehow if you vote Lib Dem next time, that means you're definitely going to stop Brexit.
I've got one question for you. Given you fly so loose now with the result of democratic votes, if you were to win a general election, Liberal Democrats, with a majority, and it's unlikely, but things happen, it's a crazy time in politics. Say you win, why should I accept it? Why shouldn't I just, the moment that result comes in, immediately stand up and say, nope, I'm not happy.
Now, Piers Morgan makes a good point because even if the Liberal Democrats win the election, the way our system works with first past the post, with all the other parties, it's likely that the Lib Dems will win about between 35 to 40% of the vote. Now, that's not even a majority of the country. So if we're going to be complaining about election results or referendum results, yes, we're not going to accept your election result. Yeah, how does that feel?
What happens if Boris Johnson wins that election with a mandate for no deal? What happens if he actually campaigns a general election for no deal? By your own criteria, Joe Swinson, would you then accept that he has a mandate for no deal if he wins?
Look, you will not be surprised that I'm going to keep standing up for what I believe in.
And that's the problem. She says that even if Boris Johnson wins the election with a clear mandate that you vote for Boris, we're going to have no deal Brexit, she still won't accept it. Seriously, I don't know how I have the energy every day to talk about these people, but someone has to, because we have to raise awareness across the country, because there are a lot of people, especially young people, who are not fully aware or fully informed about each party and what they represent and what they offer. And with all the fake news that's going around, someone has to stand up to them and tell the truth.
Not that you are not elected, actually, to pretend that democracy hasn't happened. The point of Parliament is to enact the will of the people in referendums and elections. That's your job.
Hang on, but yeah, exactly. And elections, Piers. And the point is that people do have the option to make a choice. It is not that point in time is set in stone and nobody can ever change their mind, or the country.
Now, this is the biggest problem I have, because Remainers who haven't accepted the result, like Joe Swinson, keep saying that obviously democracy didn't stop in 2016 and people can change their mind. Yes, I admit people can change their minds, and we could even have multiple votes throughout the time, but you need to implement the policy first. We voted in 2016. Let Brexit happen first. Wait after a few years to see how it goes. If you don't like it, start a campaign, start a movement to rejoin the European Union. But it hasn't even happened yet. These people are going around saying Brexit is so bad. It's been proven that it's a bad idea. How do we know? It hasn't happened yet.
You mentioned broken promises on buses, right? I mean, have you ever broken promises to the electorate?
Yeah, and I tell you what, I wouldn't recommend it. You know, we learned a lot from our time in coalition, and there's things which I regret. Yes.
Which one? Which was the biggest promise that you broke?
On tuition fees. And
all right. So just to remind people who may not know,
we got it wrong on tuition fees.
You told people in this country.
I've just said it twice, Piers.
I know, and I'm just explaining to viewers who may not be as savvy as you or I about this what you actually did, which is actually you, Joe Swinson, stood there with Liberal Democrats and you vowed we're going to get rid of tuition fees. And the moment you got a sniff of power, you actually trebled them. I mean, you talk about Boris Johnson betraying people with a promise on a bus, right? What could be a bigger breach of a promise to the young people of this country than actually trebling the fees you said you would get rid of?
Look, Piers, I've said very clearly, we got that wrong. I got that wrong. And I've learned from that. And I am determined to stop Brexit.
Now, this is my favourite thing, because the hypocrisy of the Lib Dems when it comes to empty promises, especially on tuition fees. And she's not even sorry. That's why she immediately changed the topic and moved back to the fact that she wants to stop Brexit. Say sorry properly.
Isn't great on this. I mean, you also campaigned for a referendum in Europe, didn't you?
We said that there should be a referendum if there's treaty change. We passed a law to that effect. We haven't had the treaty change. And we certainly shouldn't have been having a referendum in the circumstances of trying to save the Conservative Party with a short period of time to actually have the campaign, and then triggering Article 50 before we'd even worked out what our negotiating position was, before the Cabinet had even agreed a negotiating position. There has been a catalogue of errors by Conservative Prime Ministers in this.
To be honest, we are getting used to the hypocrisy of the Lib Dems and their empty promises, whether it was the tuition fees or the in-out referendum that they offered in 2008. I wouldn't be surprised if they win the election this time and just change their mind on cancelling Brexit, which is probably a good idea.
With
bridge
respect,
those
Joe
divides,
Swinson,
to engage in debate.
You think the way to unite this country on Brexit is to simply pretend it hasn't happened and to tell 17.5 million people your vote counted for nothing? If I get into power, literally, I'm going to ignore you. I'm not just going to have a second vote. I'm going to revoke Article 50. I'm going to stop Brexit. And you're standing there proudly saying you are the unifying voice in this country because you're going to tell 17.4 million Brits who voted in one way your vote counted for nothing. And that's going to solve everything. They're all going to go, thank you so much, Joe Swinson. I really appreciate your efforts to unify the country, and I couldn't agree with you.
So let me get this straight. Joe Swinson and the Lib Dems want to unite the country by literally ignoring 52% of this country. Right. And this is why I wonder. On the one hand, I am surprised that they are polling about, 24% roughly in the country. 24% of people actually believe in what the Lib Dems believe in. Now, that is quite worrying. But on the other hand, that means the rest, the huge chunk of the majority of the country, are Democrats. So that's the one good thing about this current situation is the majority of people don't really believe in what the Lib Dems believe in.
And for some people, led them to vote for Brexit. I appreciate it was a complex issue with millions of people voting. Of course, there were a wide variety of reasons why people voted for that. But there were some very genuine economic concerns that...
It's not some people.
That's what I said. There's millions and millions of people. And of course, therefore, there were many reasons. It's complex. It's not a binary situation where there's only one thing which was a fact.
Some people? Really? Some. 17.4 million people. And this is the point that she's making is that of millions of people who voted Brexit, she says that not everyone, it wasn't a binary choice, not everyone voted for the same reason when it came to Brexit. Interesting that she says that because you could apply the same logic to an election. Not everyone who will be voting for the Liberal Democrats next time are going to be voting to cancel Brexit. Some people are tribally Lib Dems. They've always been Lib Dem members. They can't vote for Labour or Conservative. Some people think that Liberal Democrats are liberal for social policies and they were always going to be voting Lib Dems. Some people actually won't read the manifestos. They just like the colour orange for some reason. And you can't say that everyone who voted for Brexit, they voted for different reasons, but then if they vote for the Lib Dems, they are definitely voting for one single issue. Now, moving on from Joe Swinson and the Lib Dems, as we saw this week, we had the hearing and the Gino Miller case against the Boris Johnson prorogue in Parliament. We're going to hear the verdict Monday or Tuesday early next week and see how that goes. But it's interesting because I don't think it's going to change much because even if the verdict is against the government, Boris Johnson could just prorogue Parliament immediately afterwards. So, and they can't really, by the time they complain, it's too late. Things are still on track, but it's not going to be as easy as we think. It's a bit of a challenge that's going to be coming forward when it comes to Boris being forced to ask for an extension or if they find a way to vote in Parliament to revoke Article 50. But this is where things could get quite tricky because Boris Johnson has vowed to deliver Brexit by the end of October, somehow. So he's going to have to find some sort of loophole. Otherwise, obviously, not only he's done, but also the Conservative Party is done, and the whole country is going to be a mess. So let's hope everything goes well. So next week, we're going to be covering this on a daily basis, every day at 6 p.m. So make sure you subscribe and click on notification button next to it. Otherwise, you won't be notified when I release a new video. And if you want to follow me on social media, my Twitter, Instagram are somewhere down here. I've also been told by a lot of people in the comment section, because of some of the t-shirts I have, the Brexit t-shirts, people keep asking for merchandise and t-shirts and coffee mugs and iPhone cases. I have some good news. From next week, we are going to be giving away actual merchandise. So we're going to have a lot of Brexit t-shirts, mugs and everything. So stay tuned. And next week, I'll come back to you with some more information on that. As usual, I'm Tousi, and this is the fastest growing Conservative channel in the country.